Hi everyone, and Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. We're only a couple days into this month and it's just so crazy. I just need to hit the reset button on October right now. Oh man. I just need to slow down a little bit. And just ask a question. Just pump the brakes for a minute and just ask a question, make a comment, say a thing. Maybe touch down on something that I talked about a little bit in the lecture I gave a few weeks ago at Wesleyan University, and a topic that I've been thinking of a lot, something that I've been kind of kicking around in my head that was kind of started by a YouTube comment. As a lot of you know, I read the comments on my videos often. When I get a chance, I respond to as many as possible. And I got a comment once that really kind of struck me and just echoes in my head week after week after week. Maybe you wrote it or have written it, because it's something that I'm sure a lot of people have felt at one point. Once I got a comment and it was written in such a way where it read, "Anthony, don't you ever review anything for what it is? Don't you ever review anything for what it is? Do you constantly have to be comparing something to this and to that and to the other thing, saying it's better than this, it's not as good as this?" To me, that is context. Context is everything, in my opinion, especially musical context. Whether you like it to or not, whether you want it to be or not, context just changes how you feel about music in ways you cannot even imagine. I mean, yeah, there are various kinds of context, and some more shallow than others. You could like a piece of music because the person singing it is dressed cool or is really hot. Or you can hate a piece of music because a certain group of people who listen to that kind of music, or a group of people who that music is made by, are people who, you don't perceive to, be cool, or you don't get along with them, or, you think people who listen to bro step are dopes or something like that, and you kind of like project that onto the music. Oh, so-and-so's music is okay, but their fans are idiots. Something like that. I feel like if you think hard enough about that kind of stuff, you can most definitely subtract it out of how you feel about an album. If you really do try and kind of mature a little bit and get past age, racial, and gender-based barriers of things of that nature. But there are kinds of contexts that are more difficult to kind of erase from the equation. Pieces of context that you can't even really perceive how they're affecting how you feel about an album or a piece of music, which makes it even more difficult to kind of subtract them out. I mean, they are so a part of your being that you can't even really ignore them. What your gender is, what your race is, where you grew up, how your parents raised you, what language you speak. All of these things affect how you feel about certain kinds of music, your political views as well. Certainly some of these things are easier to ignore than others. And I'm not saying that, all of them kind of pan out into a really obvious way. Like, oh, if you're a woman, you only like listening to female singers or bands that have female members, which obviously is not the case for everyone who's a woman. I'm just saying that more than you probably care to think about it, how you feel about an album or a piece of music is incredibly influenced by the kind of person you are. And again, that does not necessarily, add up to the obvious, like, if you really love listening to Death Grips, for example, that you actually like, engaging in the kind of, activities that are talked about in those songs. What is maybe most important for me, and maybe kind of more what that comment that I mentioned earlier was talking about, is musical context. I mean, How you approach music and how you feel about an album is, of course, impacted whether you like it or not, whether you want it to be or not, by your music listening history. If you like so-and-so's new album is going to be impacted by whether or not you heard their previous material and when you heard it, how many times you've heard it, what tracks or moments on that previous material you liked. It actually is also affected by nearly all the music you've ever listened to in your entire life. For example, guitar solos. Try to think of maybe the first guitar solo you ever heard that moved you. Every guitar solo, whether I do it consciously or not, is going to be compared to that one in such a way that you hear a guitar solo, oh man, that one sucks. That's a bad solo. Or wow, this one is even better. I got a new musical high out of this. As you are going through different albums and artists and genres, music that came out during different time periods, you're kind of comparing all of them subconsciously and forming what, we all call taste, which at the end of the day is essentially kind of a personal barometer of things you do and do not like. And that can be a great thing. That has its pros, but it also kind of has its cons, because kind of throwing things into that, dump pile can for sure turn you off to things that you could potentially like. For example, let's say that for some irrational reason, the first song that you've ever listened to that you hated was in the key of D or something like that, Just run with it. Now, maybe there were a lot of things that you didn't like about this track, but you just kind of took all of these things, corralled every aspect of this song, and said, you know what? This song's bad. I don't like anything about this song, including the fact that it's in the key of D. So just put all this stuff. It's crappy. It's poop. Now, of course, hating music in the key of D is just ridiculous. I mean, who hates music in the key of D? But there are lots of irrational hatreds like that you have heard about before, that are a bit more commonplace. I hate hip hop, or I hate rappers that rap about this kind of thing, or I hate albums that have saxophone solos on them, or I hate hair metal. I hate music that's too fast. I hate country. I really dislike music where the singer sings in this kind of certain way. Am I guilty of this? For sure. I'm a human being. Have I been guilty of this recently in a review? Possibly. Yeah, probably. A quick hypothetical example that I could possibly think of is, if I dislike a certain band or a certain album, but a new band or new album comes along that reminds me exactly of that album I just did not like. It's not something, I'm particularly proud of or that I like enforcing. It's just a reaction that I kind of have. Let's kind of just throw another hypothetical thing out there. There is quite a bit of music right now out on the internet that has a very, very revivalist, nostalgic edge to it. I'm sure you could find a number of bands on the internet that are taking the sounds of 80s synth pop and then just really recreating them as if, the 1980s are today. They're really kind of hardcore into the old analog synthesizers. They've got that studio sound down. They're writing the songs like they used to back in the day, and it just pretty much sounds like new, synth pop. Bam. Now, somebody who is young and is really kind of just completely not in the know with synth pop in the 80s could come along, listen to this album, and think it's really great. Somebody who grew up through that era could have a completely different opinion on this album. One that I'm, assuming that you probably already are thinking in your head, the knee-jerk reaction would be, oh, this is crap. Back in the 80s, we had real synth pop. But then again, as you can probably imagine, there are people who may have grown up through that era and would think, wow, this is great. I grew up on this kind of stuff. I'm glad to be hearing it again. And of course, as we see on this channel every week, either just in my opinions or in the opinions in the comments, if you bother to read through them, there are artists on this channel who I review who are on their third, fourth, fifth, 10th full-length album, maybe even more. And there comes that situation where you're thinking, man, I don't like this as much as this album. I don't like this as much as that. This kind of sounds like every other album they've been putting out,
for the past 3 LPs, this is the best thing they've ever put out. They blew past everything that they've ever released. They really grew. And again, those kinds of opinions are completely informed by what releases in that artist's past material you listen to the most, the order in which you listen to them, the ones you just kind of gravitated toward more emotionally, what emotions each album pulled from you, and also maybe how familiar you are with the current musical landscape and maybe other artists who are similar to that artist. So what is the lesson in this video? I have no friggin' clue. I'm just saying that whether you want it to be or not, context is everything. All the music that you've listened to up until this point, all the music that's ever happened up until this point affects how you feel about certain records. Again, like I said, there are certain kinds of context that are easier to kind of subtract out of the emotional equation. And there are others that are a little more difficult to do that with. And I think the best that we can do in that regard is to just kind of be conscious of them, be thinking of them, know how they work, know how they impact you, and why. What context does to expectations for a forthcoming album or an artist in the future is a completely different animal. But again, I mean, I think the best you can do is just kind of understand what those expectations are and do your best to think about what is actually driving you to think in that way. Other than that, I got nothing. I got no answers. Maybe I had a few in this rant. I don't know. You let me know. Anthony Fantano, context, forever.